Okay, everybody. Hello, good evening, and welcome to another unplanned, unplanned of little broadcast. So, thank you very much for being here. I've just decided to do this one kind of on the hoof, and the reason for that is that there's been so much happening in the world of COVID. I thought we would take a few moments just to try and understand those things. Most interestingly, we've seen the Scottish leader, Nicola Sturgeon. Hello, Chris. Good evening. Welcome to you. We've seen Nicola Sturgeon announce that essentially the pubs and restaurants across Scotland, or in fact most of Scotland anyway, are going to be closed for a couple of weeks. So, isn't that good news? Not so good, I guess, if you're a Republican, but then I guess Nicola doesn't seem to care about these things. So let's try and dissect this complete garbage spun out by Nicola Sturgeon and the compliant media today, and let's pull apart the logic behind it, because I think that's the most important thing. Hi, Ozzy, by the way. Thanks very much for being here. Thank you to all of those joining. I appreciate you coming on the stream, because we really do need to take apart the stuff that's being done in the name of COVID. Chris says Cranky is trying to extend furlough for political reasons. Ozzy says, "We will eat Cranky, doing our best to wreck the economy." Well, actually, you know something, Ozzy? Here's Ozzy's comment. It's an interesting one because, of course, anybody who's been to Scotland, and I guess that would be most people who will listen to this, either live or in replay, will have noticed that Scottish hospitality is a big part of the Scottish economy. Now, by closing down pubs and restaurants, essentially serving alcohol, you decimate a swathe of the Scottish economy. And of course, she must understand that, but she still does that. And I want to talk about my thinking as to why is she still doing that? Because it's obvious that what's going to happen in the next couple of days is England will follow, because Nicola Sturgeon is actually leading the UK in this issue. Boris and his rotten regime are so useless that they actually wait for Sturgeon, which is, by any definition, truly, truly remarkable. However, that's the way it is. And I suspect that in Northern Ireland, we will also follow down this route of basically closing down big chunks of hospitality on the basis that, oh, well, if anyone goes into a bar, even though that bar has got social distancing and all kinds of other nonsense and may include mask wearing, they're going to get COVID. Now, let's consider some of the facts on this. Scotland is averaging, certainly today, one person died with COVID on their death certificate, and that was announced today. That death could have been taken place, of course, any time in the last 28 days. One person. The Scottish population is 5.4 million people. How on earth do you justify shutting down an economy because one person has died with COVID as a potential cause of death on their death certificate? I mean, are we trying to get to the point where any death for anything means you shut down the economy? Well, clearly not. But nonetheless, that seems to be very much where we are headed. The other thing is, Aunt Violet makes a point here. You have to wonder why Rishi bothered with the Eat Out scheme. Well, I think actually the thing is there that he's actually having to almost justify that, because I think those in the Boris Johnson camp are saying, oh, well, yes, the help out to eat out thing that happened in August may have led to this dramatic increase in cases. Now, of course, we know that. Hello, Ajit. Nice to see you on the stream. We're talking about COVID in Scotland and elsewhere tonight. So hope you enjoy it. So the issue becomes one of how on earth does the hospitality sector, Why is it being closed down? And I'll tell you why I think it's being closed down. Because when we go to the pub, and I know there's people on this stream who enjoy it. I think, hello, Chris. And what's wrong with that? Going to the pub is part of life. A lot of people get great pleasure from going out, socializing, meeting other people, having a chat. It's very much just part of British life. Now, I'm at an age where I probably don't go to the pub very often, but I know that millions of other people do. It's part of our humanity. So if you stop us going to the pub, then basically you strip away that particular aspect of the enjoyment of our lives. And that is what this issue is about for me. This is all premeditated. It's about a chaotic form of management of us to keep us continually confused, to keep us continually off guard, and to basically, make us think that we just don't know where it's going to go next. And that is what Nicola Sturgeon is doing in Scotland. Now, I don't know. I am sure there will be many pubs and restaurants who will have to close. We've seen announcements today from the Green King chain that I think they're going to close 87 pubs. So that's going to be cost a lot of jobs. Kim says here that a couple of comments here. My landlord is expecting an unlimited further shutdown. Yeah, I think that's very much the case. And Kim, yes, it is very much gaslighting. It's 100% gaslighting. The notion that the COVID virus somehow uniquely resides in pubs and restaurants is nonsense. And I have not seen any scientific evidence to prove any empirical data that proves if you go to the pub, you've got a greater chance of getting COVID than, say, going to your local supermarket. I mean, if that was the case, then you'd have to close your local supermarket, and they haven't done that yet, have they? Sturgeon's very keen to point out, of course, that this is necessary to stop this huge increase in cases. Well, this is the whole case-demic argument, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So what they are essentially doing is they're taking PCR tests and they're sampling that. They're conducting vast numbers of these PCR tests. The PCR test then returns a positive, and the media and the government are then suggesting that that's an infection. But of course, it's not an infection. A positive PCR test does not mean that the person has got infectious COVID. And you have to take into consideration false positives before you get to the point of being able to state the actual number of infections. Government do not provide that figure. They hide that figure from us. Why do you think that might be? Why do you think government, government doesn't want you to know what the false positive percentage is? Well, I'll give you my suggestion. I think because if they did, they would, someone says, can't get you at work, David. Yeah, can't get you at work. Yeah, that's right, Aussie. Can't get you at work. It can't get you, it can't get you in certain places. Apparently cafes, by the way, get this, cafes in Scotland are going to have to close at 6 p.m. at night. So does the virus, does it at 6:01, does it become lethal, but at 5:59 it's dormant? And these cafes, of course, mustn't serve any alcohol for them to be able to be even open to 6 p.m. And if you stay in a hotel, then the hotel can serve you food after 6 p.m., but it can't be with alcohol. So this is going to actually, I mean, who would want to go to the and stay in such a hotel? Chris makes the point, I can't see Dublin opening again this year. No Christmas. Absolutely right, Chris. Unfortunately, the Irish government is as bad as the Scottish government, and they just want to punish their own people. So that's why today, or last night at 12 o'clock, Ireland entered what's called level 3 COVID regulations. And that's pretty draconian. And Scotland's now going to enter the same from Friday, I think, at 5 p.m. Friday enters this bizarre situation which Nicola Sturgeon has contrived. And yeah, Jeff, you're right. It's a bit like Dracula. It only comes out at night. Well, except it's debatable if it even comes out at all. I mean, over the summer months, we've seen the levels of COVID deaths dwindle away till about, certainly in Northern Ireland, one or so a day, or actually probably less than that for some weeks. But COVID-19 is a respiratory illness. We all understand that. And respiratory illnesses come back in the autumn. Now, I've been preaching this over the last number of months. I kept saying they're going to wait to the autumn. They're going to wait to the return of respiratory illnesses, and they're going to use that to keep us locked down. So what they've got is this massive testing procedure going on, which is giving them the number of positive PCR cases, tests, which they're then translating as infectious cases. And on the basis of that, that's why Sturgeon does what she does. That's why Matt Hancock will announce the closure of pubs, I think, in Northern England very, very shortly, in the next day or two. That's why I think here in Northern Ireland, we're going to have the same. They are manipulating statistics and basically, in my view, misrepresenting what the data says. I mean, as I say, I go back to the fact there was one person died in Scotland, one person out of a population of 5.4 million. How on earth can they justify what they're doing? Chris says, let's hope they give out the daily unemployment figures. Well, Chris, you're dead right, of course, because the reality is that what has been countenanced today in Scotland, and which will follow in other parts of the UK, will cause many jobs losses. But the thing is, Chris, you see, I don't think they care. I do not think that this government is particularly bothered. Certainly Sturgeon's not bothered about the numbers of people who become unemployed, because those people then have to go on the dole. They become dependent on the state, and the state becomes more powerful. So I think this is part of the problem, that we do have this pincer attack, which is going to affect small business and medium-sized business. Let's be clear, the banks are not unhappy with this. The banks are still making loads of money from this. Big corporations are doing fine. It's the small to medium businesses which are being well and truly screwed over by Sturgeon, by Boris, by the clowns we have at Stormont, and equally by the clowns, of course, in Cardiff as well. We shouldn't forget them. So I do think that as we approach Halloween, folks, we are going to move into deeper and deeper kind of lockdown. I think the next couple of weeks are going to be very devastating for our friends who operate in hospitality. I feel really sorry for those folks. I think there will be many job losses. We've actually just saw today that two of Belfast's most famous pubs are to close with the loss of 100 jobs. And the reason for that is they're wet pubs. They don't have, I mean, this other madness that people could sit outside and have a meal with a drink up until 6 o'clock at night. Well, you know, seriously, who's going to be, in the kind of weather we get, who's going to be sitting outside? We don't, this is not, you know, an Italy, this is not Italy, this is not Spain, this is not Florida, this is the UK. And listen, the weather isn't very good. You don't sit out in this kind of weather. So, and there's a really interesting stat. It doesn't surprise me, Kim, 70% of pub profit is made over Christmas. Yeah, and you see about 40% closures in England and Wales. Then I think that's pretty much on the button, Kim. Actually, Chris also makes a really good point. Excuse me. He says that, did you see Hancock say yesterday that if infections rise, then there'll be no treatment in the NHS for cancer? Shameful. Actually, on that, I was made aware of a situation today of someone who had to go in for a serious cancer operation for pancreatic cancer. And it's pretty much a touch and go operation, right? That individual has had to go in, and nobody was allowed to go in with that individual. So they had to face what potentially, and for all I know at this point, may have been a life-ending operation. And there was no one to hold their hand, no one to say they loved them, just no one. And that's the National Health Service, the most cruel health service, I believe, anywhere on this planet. I never clapped it. I never will clap it. At the moment, I understand that National Health Service is now suggesting it may be overwhelmed at a time when, for example, I'm aware that in the whole of Northern Ireland, there are 13 individuals in intensive care, in the intensive care unit. And that is what the government calls COVID patients. But that could equally be someone with cancer who also has tested PCR for COVID. So the reality we have is that we have got a cruel government operating a cruel health service. Chris is right, the hospitals are empty and they're going to stay pretty empty. And all the time, those of us, are the people who suffer. Nick says, it's not just people who end up in the dole, there's others losing their lives. Well, it's the same point. Yes, Nick, there's people dying of cancer, there's people with serious mental health illnesses, there's people committing potentially suicide, they're so depressed. This is the reality of where we are. And it contrasts massively with this fantasy that the government's conjured up, like, oh, the NHS, good old NHS, it's there for you. Thank you, NHS. The NHS, as I say, in all of this, has behaved deplorably, but nobody calls them out. Nobody asks awkward questions. And I mean, again, this is part of it, actually. Chris says there's 5 large testing area in Blackburn, and every one of them was empty. Very strange. Yeah, but the reason they have all these testing centres is they bring, in fact, actually, I think they were paying some people to go in. So they pay you to go in, get a test, and then the test comes back as a PCR positive test, and they turn that into an infectious case. This is not the reality of it. As I say, it's really bad. The thing that annoys me more than actually any of that is the fact that do you ever find any mainstream journalist asking any tough questions? Because, yeah, Rose, you're right. It's how bleak to have faced such a difficult procedure alone. It's awful to think about. Well, Rose, I mean, the other one on this one is, by the way, like there has been over the last number of months, people who have gone into hospital with very serious other illnesses. And, excuse me, those people have died, and they died alone. They died with no one there. The family were not allowed in. This, to me, is unbelievable levels of cruelty. And it demonstrates to me that the so-called cures for COVID are much worse than actual COVID. And I think that's a reasonable comment to make insofar as you're making people in their final moments on this planet die alone. I'm sorry, I cannot potentially accept that. And Jeff makes a point here that suicides are also going to go through the roof. You're right. I've seen people on social media. Now I'm not on Twitter, as you know, anymore, but I am on Facebook and Parler and whatnot. And I've seen people putting up comments which make me sad. People sort of saying, I just can't I can't take another 6 months of this. And again, we have got a good. I wish I could do polls on a poll on this. I don't know how to do a poll on this, but does anyone on the stream know anyone that's currently ill with COVID? I don't. I have not personally known anyone who has had COVID, let alone who has died of COVID. And I invite others in the stream to tell me otherwise. But for an illness, a plague, a pandemic, as they like to call it, it's remarkable how very few people know anyone who's died of COVID. This is very strange. But on another level, it's really not that strange at all. Because if you look at the overall mortality figures, they really, for COVID, the deaths all occurred back in March, April, I guess you could say, of this year. That's when the majority of COVID deaths occurred. And those were mostly elderly people. And they were mostly elderly people with comorbidities. And one of the things that is worth bearing in mind, by the way, folks, is that last year, 2019, in the UK, and I believe Ireland as well, was a year where it was a pretty mild flu season. So there were fewer very elderly people taken by the flu in 2019. So they got through 2019, they entered 2020, and boom, come March comes COVID, and that took them, sadly. So I mean, look at this. There's not one person on this stream who knows anyone who has had COVID, uh, and who has certainly died of COVID. I know people, by the way, who have gone and been tested for COVID, and in every case, the test came back negative. I actually know, I think I told this story on Monday night, and it's a true story. I know of a lady and her daughter who felt that they maybe had a problem in terms of COVID, and they made an appointment to go to the local COVID testing centre. When they got there, there was a huge crowd, a huge queue rather, and so they went away. They didn't bother hanging around. And 2 days later, they both got a positive test result. Now, that's a positive test result based on the fact that neither of them had taken the test. So can we believe seriously the figures that were being given by government? I suggest no, that we can't. And the government needs to be more honest and open with us and share information so we can all critically assess that, excuse me, so we can assess accurately that which is happening. The reality is that, Ozzy says, my sister not well, said it's a viral infection and didn't send her for a test. Well, the reality is that, as I found the other week, this is the season when you get the cold or you get the flu. I had a cold. I'm old enough to recognize what the symptoms of the cold are. If you got a runny nose and a bit of a cough, and you're feeling a bit lousy, you probably got the cold. So you don't need to go and get a COVID test. You take care of yourself, you stay away from other people, and you just be sensible. That's all you have to do. But of course, that doesn't. Nick, actually, this is interesting. Nick says, I do actually know a few that have died of COVID, but I have also had problems within the family of people suffering because the NHS shut down because of COVID. Well, I mean, there you go, Nick. It's perfectly reasonable that you may have encountered some people who have died. As I say, just in my general experience, I've not met anyone. Now, Chris then raises the killer question: at what point of economical suicide does this madness end? I don't think there is a point. I've got to be really brutal with you and say, I believe that what's happening at the moment is part of a broader reset. And that reset means that it doesn't matter about the global economy melting down. That isn't a problem. All that means is that a lot of small businesses will disappear. A lot of people will become much more reliant on the government. And in that situation, the governments become stronger and the governments can then implement their will and there's less resistance. So I fear that this will not end. This madness over COVID will not end until people waken up, open their eyes and recognize that that what's happening to us is unreasonable. It's not in tune with a medical response to this respiratory illness. We keep hearing about the R number. The R number's back again. Have you noticed that? They keep talking about the R number. The R number is not a medical term. It's a computer modeling term. And because it's a computer modeling term, the politicians that trot it out, just like they don't understand what a false positive is, they don't get that. They don't understand the percentage thing about that, nor do they really seem to understand that the R number has very little significance, if any, to the actual reality of what's happening with COVID infections in the community. If you can't work out the number of false positives you've got, then you cannot establish what the total number of positives that you've got. And since they won't tell you the former, you can't accurately determine the latter. Now, how come the BBC or Sky or Channel 4, how come none of these people are able ever talk about these things? And again, I believe that they're all part of the problem. They will not challenge the health minister. They won't talk. They won't challenge Nicola Sturgeon. The only thing we seem to get from the journalists that I see on the TV is they want the economy closed down even quicker. They want us back into lockdown. And one of the reasons they might want us back into lockdown, and I'll just throw this one out as a theory, is, well, I guess if we're all locked down, we're sitting at home, we consume more TV, we listen to more radio, and that makes things better for them. So you see, lockdown can suit some people. It devastates many, many other people. But lockdown can have advantages for some people. And I believe that is precisely what was going to happen. We have Pat Johnny here saying Minneapolis Fairview Health just closed 16 clinics and cut 900 jobs. How do we lose hospitals in a, well, that's a very good question, actually. How do you lose hospitals in a supposed pandemic? Don't know. It's a very good question. I don't have an answer to that, except that our experience, for example, in the UK, is that hospitals have had the quietest year ever. I have my sources within NHS hospitals. People talk to me, as is the way. And, I do not believe that these hospitals are in any regard overwhelmed. And now, as was pointed out earlier, we've got Matt Hancock threatening, for example, cancer patients that, if the virus rate increases, then you might not get your cancer treatment. But that means we're going to have tens of thousands of cancer deaths. How is that an achievement? So honestly, in all of this, I think the Boris Johnson administration is rotten. It's toxic. It's turned out to be a massive disappointment. And, I'm sure you saw that they had their party conference the other day. And did you see the slogan that they had? Build back better. Did you see that? That was Boris's slogan, the Conservative Party slogan, which interestingly enough happens to be Joe Biden's slogan, build back better, which interestingly happens to be something which is in several, United Nations documents, build back better. If you Google build back better and research it, you will find that there's something very disturbing about what's going on. And the virus, in some regards, is the worst is not the worst of our concerns. Simon says he took his wife to the hospital the other day and was not allowed to sit next to her, but we was asleep in the same bed 2 hours before. Yeah, I mean, Simon, this is what I refer to as the unusual cruelty of the NHS. I'm aware of other people who were told that, people in need of operations, quite serious operations, and they were told that, well, you only can have that operation if you test negative for COVID. So if we discover you've got COVID, even though you're asymptomatic, even though you're fine in every regard, you're not getting your operation. Well, I mean, how does that affect someone who's got a brain tumor, for example? So they're maybe wanting to get in and get what could be life-saving treatment, because that's a particularly awful condition. And yet, in that scenario, if they are asymptomatic for COVID, they're not going to get the treatment. And then Chris then brings the question: how long before football, cricket, and rugby clubs start to go bankrupt? No fans, no money. I wouldn't think for much longer, because apart from the uber wealthy clubs, the Manchester Uniteds, the Liverpools, and teams like that, I think that, certainly my own team, Grimsby Town, we who have actually, we've not been allowed to play our last 3 games because a couple of players tested positive for COVID. But again, this testing positive to COVID means nothing, because did you see there that the West Ham manager, Davy Moyes, tested positive for COVID, and was the media was full of this. He actually was still in charge. He logged in to the games remotely, so even though he wasn't actually at the ground for the West Ham games, he was still able to give direction to the players. And the reason he was able to do that is because he was well. He was good. There was nothing wrong with him. He had a positive PCR test. Repeat, a positive PCR test result does not necessarily equate to a positive infection. But this is completely ignored by the media, and that's why they're using the case-demic to bundle us all into an inevitable lockdown by the end of this month, I believe. They're going to sink it in terms of Halloween, and we're going to be sitting at home. I don't believe that kids will necessarily be allowed to go out and trick or treat. Someone says, as Aussie says, we're going to build windmill. Yeah, we're going to build. Well, this is the other thing, of course. Boris's Green New Deal. This notion of wind turbines powering your kettle is so laughable. Let me tell you, friends, if I was relying on windmill power, wind turbine power. Actually, I've got to answer this question. Ajit says, "Do you watch IPL?" Yes, I do. I've been watching it avidly. It's great entertainment, actually. But even then, Ajit, I noticed that there's no actual spectators in the stadium. It's all just fake noises. But it's good fun, some good games, and very enjoyable cricket. Welcoming Ruth onto the stream. Ruth says incorrect methods of PCR testing being done. Well, the problem with the PCR test is, as you know, Ruth, and as many people on the stream will understand, the PCR test was never intended for this kind of mass testing. So it's being used incorrectly in the first place by using it on the sort of scale that they are. But then, as I say, every test has a false positive rate. And the false positive rate, as we understand it, means that roughly between 50 to 90% of all tests are false. Every positive test, 50 to 90% of them are false. So, but again, the media don't want to talk about this. The media is probably more of the problem, actually, than even the government. Because and here we have Kim actually sums it up. It's a total destruction of British social life and culture, and I kind of agree with that. Think about this: if you enjoy going to the pub, you can't. If you enjoy going out for a meal, you can't. If you enjoy going to watch a live sporting occasion, be it a football match, rugby match, cricket, whatever it is, you can't. Do you see where this is leading? Where this is leading is fundamentally to a world in which all the things that we enjoy doing, is being stripped away from us. Now, Custom Spoon says, and thank you for being on the stream, by the way. How do we beat the psychopaths? Well, we've got to fight back. I mean, I noticed in the sort of thing that gets me down is when I listen to the local health minister. Now, I understand that not everyone on this stream is from my neck of the woods, but the local health minister here in Northern Ireland had a one of these clown show press conferences today. And in this, he said he felt that people were giving two fingers to the important COVID regulations. And he just didn't understand why people, for example, aren't all wearing masks. And this clown doesn't understand that under the government COVID regulations, there are many reasons why people may not legitimately wear a mask. Now, I'm wondering, is he just so stupid he doesn't understand that? Or is he just willfully glossing over that? Yeah, Ozzy, the wee Robin. Don't even start me on the wee Robin. I'd love to be in one of those. I wish, rather than having all these clowns from the BBC, local BBC and UTV and people like that turn up, I wish it. And why could they not invite me? I'd ask a couple of good questions of the minister and the chief medical officer. But of course, the reason the very fact I would ask such questions is the reason I have absolutely no chance. And actually, Jeff, you've just reminded me. It's pubs, sports, cinema. Yes, we see the cinemas now going down the tube. Nightclubs, all forms of entertainment are being stripped away, and they seem to want to keep big sporting events going, but they want them to be crowd free. The Matrix says unity is what they fear the most. Majorities are dangerous, and that's why. Yeah, you're dead right. Again, I completely agree with your comment. They seek to divide us. I can see people out wearing masks, folks, and I respect that. If that gives them comfort, then who am I to criticize them? It's not my place. But it cuts the other way. When they see me without my mask, they should respect me and not become hostile or aggressive. And as I said, I've made it clear to you successfully over quite a while since this all began. I don't wear a mask, and I'm not wearing a mask. I'm exempt, and I understand COVID regulations, and so should you. Chris says, yes, yeah, Matrix, you're right. It's Sharia compliant. That's a bit of luck, isn't it? Strange. What a strange coincidence. Chris asks, how long before Boris is his poll tax moment? Well, actually, Chris, this is really how it's all going to end. The English people, just like the Irish people, Ger, are going to have to rise up against these governments who have basically taken them hostage, using COVID as an excuse to implement a very disturbing and much more globalist agenda. Ozzy, I can't let this one go without comment. Have you seen the trailer for tonight's Nolan show? He was standing shouting at people outside shop. Yeah, Ozzy, just on this one here. I mean, as you know, Nolan would be scared of having me on his useless show, but I would love Stephen Nolan to confront me coming out of a garage, because I won't wear masks in garage anywhere else because I'm exempt lawfully. But I would love him to confront me, because it wouldn't end too well for Stephen Nolan. These bombasts in the media think that it's quite good fun to bully ordinary people, maybe. Ordinary people who, yeah, I've seen Computing Forever, his channel is very good, yeah. I mean, that's Dave Cullen, a really good, excellent guy, excellent Irish guy. Computing Forever is his channel. If you really want to understand all that's going on in terms of the big picture, then please subscribe to Computing Forever and support Dave on YouTube or any other channel that he broadcasts on. But I do think that I would really like Stephen Nolan to try and talk to me. And you're right, Ruth. It is a absolutely useless show. But I just don't like this notion of, patronizing, preening, pompous personalities like Nolan bullying ordinary people. Some of these people may not be as fully aware of COVID regulations as some of us are, but I would love Nolan to do that with me, and I'd love it to be filmed so the world could see what happens when Nolan more than meets his match. And by the way, I mean, as I say, I'm not I'm not on Twitter, so I can't contact Nolan directly. But those of you who still are on Twitter might want to sort of say to Nolan, well, if you're so brave and you're so confident that you know what you're talking about with regard to masks, why don't you bring David Vance on so he can have a little chat to you and your listeners about the absolute impertinence of the things that you say and do, and your bullying of the community. A significant section of this community, I think, are uncomfortable with wearing masks. And in many cases, for example, elderly people, this is certainly not good for them. There's very little, if any, science for it. I think for the past 40 years, there have been successive studies suggesting that masks are not helpful. And it's good to see people like Tilly and Ruth says try contacting him on Facebook. Yeah, maybe I'll do that, Ruth. Actually, when I finish this, because I just this whole thing, the media here is basically out to say to people, ho ho ho, listen, wise up, wear a mask. If you don't wear a mask, you're going to kill Granny. This is so wrong and so offensive, and this is. This is what needs to be confronted. Now, we can do this on social media, as I try to do through my live streams and on Parler, on YouTube, and of course on Facebook. But I do think we need to take the battle to these people and put the right arguments to them and see how they argue back. How come not one journalist in Northern Ireland has asked about false positives? Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they're all on the same side as the people engendering the fear. This is all about fear. That and that's why the other day President Trump, taking that mask off, standing on the White House balcony, was the most inspirational image that I've seen in quite a while. And I think of naturally all the bedwetters out there had convulsions at this. Oh, look at him. He's not wearing his mask. Joe Biden wants to put America in a mask for 3 months. I think that, and again, Ruth's right. We need to keep our backbone and fight back. And one of the ways, Ruth, we fight back is that we don't swallow the garbage that they put out, that we share information amongst ourselves. I do as much as I can to show as much stuff to you folks as I'm able to. But if we get a chance, then we most definitely do need to take the battle to the enemy, and the enemy is the mainstream media. The enemy is a political class prostituting themselves to the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization, of course, is a subsidiary of the United Nations. Kim says, get Nolan to debate Van Morrison about COVID. Yeah, that would be quite a good one, actually. Van Morrison, again, a guy who earned my respect for what he said about it. And again, the Matrix says, they're not after Trump, they're after us. He's just in the way. No, I agree. But I think you might agree with me that the only thing that stops them getting us is Trump. That's why, and I believe Trump will win on the 3rd of November. That's going to deliver a hammer blow to the globalists who, Ellie says here, Nolan has a lot to answer for. He pits people against each other. We talked about this earlier, actually. This is the way the enemy work. They're all about division. They want us to be angry with each other. And I think that little is achieved. You achieve very little by being angry. You're far better to try and be reasonable and balanced. And if you can convince people, then that's the best way to go. Jeet says, mind watching your interview on Reach India TV. Is that the one where they interviewed me? The Reach India TV people interviewed me the other day. Yeah, Jeet, has that gone out? I'm not sure. I certainly enjoyed doing that and plan to do much more stuff with my good Indian friends. And that's the thing. We are united folks around the world. Be it here in the UK, be it across in the States, be it in India. There's lots of us people whose eyes are wide open. We know exactly what's going on, and that makes us, of course, dangerous to those who want to divide us, put us against each other. But by the same token, we do know what's going on. So from my perspective, folks, I'm trying to do a lot, as much as I can, to on whatever platform I'm able to use, which is not obviously Twitter these days, to try and get across the key messages of this one. And the big message, I think, is that, look, let's stay focused. Let's not bend the knee. Let's not bow down. Let's not submit to the COVID tyranny. We should challenge them all the time. We should, just like President Trump, look at him in 72 hours. He went, the media were hoping him dead on Friday morning of last week. He was back in the White House on Monday afternoon. Isn't that's excuse me, that's the kind of heroic thing that we need to see. Actually, Pat makes an interesting point. In this, Governor Walz said mask will be the last thing to go. It's like 98% compliance here. They say the science is already settled if you complain. Yeah, that's a classic globalist argument. If you challenge them on the whole environmental piece, they will tell you the science is already settled. If you challenge them over COVID, they say the science is already settled. But it's not. It's never. Science, by definition, is never settled. And as I say, when it comes to this issue of mask wearing, for the last 40 years, they have not found sufficient evidence that suggests that masks do diddly squat to stop and prevent transmission of infection. So it's only been since June when the World Health Organization suddenly changed its mind based on what it said was political reasons, that masks were considered to be something that you shouldn't wear. Actually, earlier this year, we had luminaries like Matt Hancock and Dr. Fauci saying that you shouldn't wear masks. And then they said that you should wear masks. But that's how they operate. Chris, you're absolutely right. I used to be disgusted, but as you know, I try to be amused these days, and that's never mind my red shoes, and to try and keep a sense of humor about the whole thing. So look, I'm reading your comments here. I'll not be watching the Nolan show, by the way. I would sooner, I'd sooner, I don't know, do something very bad than watch the awful Stephen Nolan show. Absolute garbage. Pig swill journalism served up for the brain dead would be a kind way of looking at it. Ajay, thank you for your kind wishes regarding President Trump. I think President Trump and Prime Minister Modi represent twin beacons of hope for the world. I wish I could say the same for Boris Johnson, but I can't, to be honest. I want rid of Boris Johnson. He's proven to be a huge globalist plant. You can see where he's coming from. Everything he says and does is appalling. And I gotta hope that we we somehow just get rid of him. I'm sick of them. We need change. Well, listen, folks, that's it from me for tonight. Hope you enjoyed this. I just get so irritated about all the COVID nonsense that's been going on. I thought I would take to the stream and to talk to you. So I will be posting this across onto Parler and some of my other platforms. But in the meantime, can I thank you all very much for being here tonight? Appreciate your presence. Appreciate your endless support to me. You're all very, very kind, and and thank you very much for here. Chris says, "What's the COVID death toll in Northern Ireland?" COVID death toll in Northern Ireland is, I think it's about 543 people or something, round about that. But so it's a pretty, every death is sad and tragic, of course. But in the greater scheme of things, Chris, we're going to find many more cancer patients, cardiac patients, and whatnot ending up in cemeteries because of what we're doing. That's it from me. Thank you very much for being here. I will be back as soon as possible. Listen, thanks for being with me. Cheers, everybody. Have a good evening. Stay safe.